Hello again, and welcome back, dear listeners and patrons. This is Ian Koval with another episode of the Canterbury Faire podcast. Today I'm being joined by Alison White. She is the daughter of Faire. And so let's go ahead and get right into the questions. First up, who are you and who is your character?
Wow, big questions. Well then, my name is Alison White. I am Nancy's daughter. And as for my character, I play Queen Elizabeth I. I also am the Canterbury Faire volunteer coordinator, so pretty much I'm busy 24/7.
Alright, good to hear. Alright, second question. When and where was your first fair?
My first fair was down in Philomath at Shrewsbury. I was, I think, in 6th grade, so good 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And I instantly fell in love, even when it was at the fairgrounds and it doesn't have the wonderful ambiance it has now. I loved it. Every part of it. It was great.
What was your initial reaction to fair?
My initial reaction was that I was stepping through a time portal. I love history. My family, they've always been history buffs. I think the main topic of conversation during holiday dinners and whatnot was one piece of history or another. And so I've always been predispositioned to love this time period. And when I walked into that fair, I was immediately transported back. And there were knights in shining armor, there were maidens, there were these wonderful period wares that you couldn't find anywhere else. And it was so wonderfully unique that I just wanted to go back. A guy, just a regular vendor, came up and said, "My lady," and kissed my hand. I was sold. Completely.
Why do you like the Renaissance period?
That's a really big question for me. I just mentioned that I've always been predispositioned to love history, but the Renaissance period, it was a time for re-enlightenment, a focus more towards intelligence and studies rather than the wars that had been plaguing Europe at the time. And it's just such an interesting period to see how the human nature changed. And so, on an intellectual level, I like it like that. I like all the new discoveries that were made. But on a purely materialistic level, I love the clothing. The clothing is just wonderful and elaborate, and the jewels, everything was over the top. And for a person that loves theater and costuming, I absolutely love this time period.
Fifth question. What do you like about Canterbury?
Canterbury in particular has this wonderful ambiance. We're not a ridiculously huge fair. We have this family intimacy almost. It feels like you are a part of it. And with it being set in the woods, it feels like you're in wrong time period, I know, but it feels like you're in a Robin Hood Sherwood forest. Almost an enchanted forest sort of feel. And I love that small feeling that you can actually sit on a bench, end up talking to 5 different people, make connections with them on a level that you never would with maybe a bigger fair. And I love that sort of feeling. Finding a family, almost. It makes you feel a part of the magic. I think that's my favorite thing about Canterbury.
What are your favorite activities at fair?
So I have to answer this on a couple different levels.
Alright, go ahead.
As a patron, someone just entering fair, I loved walking around and interacting with the characters. Just one of my favorite things was when I was just in mundane, everyday clothing. They would call me naked and say that I was streaking. And just hearing these random bits of conversation and playing with the actors was so much fun for me as a patron. As a participant of fair, not playing the queen, I love going and working at the bar. The bar has such a wonderful, upbeat energy to it that I just feed off of it, and I love being there. Everyone's in a good mood. And as the queen, my favorite thing at fair is playing with the kids. Having the kids come up to me and be just completely nervous. A couple of them have been literally shaking when they come up and meet the queen. That they are just the most adorable little ones in the entire world. I love doing that as the queen.
What is your fondest fair memory?
So a couple years ago in Canterbury, I think actually our third year that we did it, we got rained out. My mother has this saying, it never rains after the 1st of July. We continually remind her of this because it poured. It was a mud pit. And the site where Canterbury is actually marshy and swampy during the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. The place where the arena is, in particular, becomes just this pool of muck. And that year, I wasn't even wanting to come out in the dress because of all the mud. The queen's dress is so elaborate and expensive, it's hard to find a dry cleaner that's willing to take it. But everyone came out, it was raining to beat the band, and all the entertainers were working double time to try and entertain the few people that were there.
Yeah, because the joust was canceled.
The joust, yeah, they weren't able to do it because the ground is mostly clay, and it was too slippery.
Unsafe for the horses.
Yeah. So my nobles and I are huddling in our pavilion, which at that time was at the end of the joust arena. And all of a sudden, I see one of my good friends in her wench costume streaking towards the joust arena with another person. And they're screaming, "No, he's mine! No, he's mine! How dare you, you wench!" And they tumble into the arena and start mud wrestling. And just, it was such a wonderfully spontaneous thing that I was dumbfounded. And a couple of my nobles were like, "Darn it, I want to be in wenchwear. I want to join in." And it ended with them just sitting on the ground flinging mud at each other and laughing. It was a magical moment. It was wonderful.
What do you look forward to most about fair?
Oh, I look forward to seeing my fair family. When you do fair, there's this wonderful group of people that you meet and you connect with, and you only see them for certain parts of the year. The rest of the year, you sort of keep in contact through Facebook and whatnot, but I love seeing these wonderful people every year and hanging out with them and acting with them. They're such a special bunch. It's wonderful.
And the last of the general questions, are there any tips or information that you would like to share with the new fairgoers?
New fairgoers, I would recommend you sit and watch the people that don't appear to be doing that much. Because everyone has a small story going. One way or another, we're all actors. Some of them, if you don't sit and watch, you'll completely miss. A lot of people just coming into fair come for the joust, which the joust is a wonderful show, and definitely go watch it. And then they'll go shopping and they think that's it. But there are so many shows all throughout the day. There are little storylines going on with all the actors. I would just recommend sitting and spending the day there and really paying attention to everyone. Sit down and talk with people. That's how you find all the fun stuff.
So into some of the more specific questions, you mentioned that your character is Queen Elizabeth I here at Canterbury. Can you just give us a quick overview of who she was historically?
She was an amazing person, first off. She was born in 1533 to the infamous Henry VIII. That,
I am.
Yeah, pretty much. Everyone knows, chopping his wife's head off. And her mother was Anne Boleyn, whose head was chopped off when she was 2.5 years old, I think. Her stepmother, Catherine Howard, I believe, she also had her head chopped off when she was 5 to 8 years old, so definitely old enough to understand at that point. She had one older sister, Mary, and a younger brother, Edward. And the line of succession made it so that Edward came first, and Mary came second, and Elizabeth came third. There was a big, huge debate over religion at the time, and Henry created the Church of England, the Protestant religion, and whereas most of Europe was Catholic at the time, her older sister Mary was a devout Catholic, whereas her brother and Elizabeth herself were Protestant. So pretty much every time England got a new monarch, there was this religious turmoil, lots of burnings of heretics, which pretty much whatever religion the monarch was, all other religions were heretic religions. So every few years they were going through this change of religion. One moment you were in the right, and the next you were a heretic. Edward was a very sickly king, and he died very young. And Mary had a short reign as well. She ended up becoming Bloody Mary, as a lot of people called her, because she burned so many Protestants.
I thought it was because she was a fan of hot sauce and vodka.
If only. And Elizabeth, she took the crown, I believe at the age of 25 or so, in 1558. And the people, in some ways loving, because she didn't persecute anyone because of their religion. She had this live and let live policy. At the same time, because her mother was Anne Boleyn, and the king accused her of using witchcraft against him and every sort of thing, and she also made Henry divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, to marry her in the Protestant religion, so there was a lot of question as to her legitimacy as well. In some ways, she was very loved at first, in some ways she wasn't, and she decided that she would never marry. But she didn't tell anyone this, really. So she kept pitting princes against each other, using them for her own purposes, and really, she was an amazing person because, at the time, men were the rulers. Women were considered weak, and weak-minded on top of that. So she proved them all wrong, manipulating men in a men's game. She kept her country safe in a time where it would have been easily wiped out by a higher-powered nation like Spain. In fact, they tried once and their entire armada was wiped out in weather in the English Channel. So she was just an utterly amazing woman. Her rule was called the Golden Age, and she ended up ruling until she died at the age of 69, I believe, in 1603. And she was the end of the Tudor dynasty. So that's a rather involved overview, but that's kind of what's going on at the time period.
Alright. So what type of work went into playing Elizabeth I?
Well, as that overview might have indicated, a lot of research. I mean, not only on dates and what's going on in general, but in order to produce something fairly believable for Faire, you also have to, research the types of fabric they had, the dress that they would wear, the jewelry, the manners. There are a couple of court knightings that I do that we had to look up, good wordings for the ceremony and all that sort of stuff, and what would have been used. There is just so many minute details that need to be researched, and we do the best we can. We definitely are not a historical reenactment. I don't think that would be fun for anyone to do because Elizabeth never would have been seen. Having it based in history but not actual reenactment keeps it fun for everyone.
Okay, just trying to get a feel of authenticity.
Exactly.
What do you find most interesting about her?
She was a woman in a man's world who was constantly questioned in her legitimacy, and she played the game so well. She knew, I believe, 2 or 3 languages fluently, and England at the time, though it was powerful, in terms of money, they were bankrupt. Because of all the religious wars Mary's husband, Philip of Spain, waged right before her rule. So she really took an almost destitute country and brought it up to be one of the greatest in the world. And pretty much by herself. She had a good council of advisors, but she was the brains, definitely. So I admire her for her strength and ingenuity.
Given unlimited control and resources, what would you do with your character?
Well, the main problem with doing actual reenactment of the different, pavilions and whatnot is budget. My nobles always tease me because I have champagne tastes with a beer budget. So, if I had unlimited money, I would probably make a replica of the Grand Hall and hold banquets and masks and dances. I would outfit everyone in most of them are period correct costumes, but really I would give them all out jewelry, and it would just be this amazing spectacle of opulence. That's what I would love to do, and bring the patrons in on it.
What is your favorite part about playing Elizabeth I?
My favorite part is probably also my least favorite, if you could believe it. I love the clothing. The clothing is beautiful. You can see pictures of it on the Canterbury Facebook. The dress is huge and tapestry fabric. There are several layers to it. When I wear that dress, I have a corset, a hoop skirt, a thing called a bum roll, which makes your butt look bigger and holds the majority of the dress's weight. Mm-hmm. And then you have an underskirt, which goes on top of the hoop skirt. And then you have an overskirt, which splits to show the underskirt. And then you have an over bodice. And then you have 3 sets of sleeves. So it's quite elaborate, and my dress in particular, the entire thing has pearls all over it. Pearls were a very much in vogue thing back then. And I love finding the little brooches and strings of pearls to adorn the outfits. But having Canterbury in the end of July, it's really hot. Horribly hot. And the fabric of the overdress is all tapestry fabric, and black to boot. So, I love the dress, but it is ridiculously uncomfortable to wear in that time of year. I think in England, it would have been fine. But in Oregon, it's a little much.
Alright, anything else you want to add to our listeners?
Well, I would say that my other job at Canterbury is volunteer coordinator, and we definitely always need volunteers. There are several places that people can volunteer, some that require garb, costume, and some that happen before or after fair, so like setup and takedown. And
that we just need another pair of hands.
Exactly. And when you volunteer, you get into the fair's after-hours activities where the general public isn't allowed, which is always kind of fun. And you also, if you work a certain amount of hours, you can get free tickets for your friends and family. So, other than that, the other perk of becoming a volunteer is you get to have a fair family. And I would say that's the most magical thing of all. So please, if you have a little bit of time, come out and volunteer. We would love to have you. And it's easy.
Alright, thank you very much, Alison, for your time and responding to all of our questions. And if anyone is interested in learning more about Canterbury Fair or interested in becoming a volunteer to get access to that after hours or free tickets and become part of the fair family, get brought into the fold, you can find out a lot more information through our Facebook and our website that are going to be linked down in the description. All right, Alison, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for your time and for your support of Canterbury Fair.